Welcome to the Freedom Camp Podcast, rooted in truth, growing in freedom, and built on the belief that you weren't meant to grow alone. Each week, I'll share honest stories, insights, and simple questions to help you explore the unseen things that keep you from living in the freedom that's already yours. And take brave, intentional steps toward the life you were made for. This is your space to reconnect with your authentic self and grow in freedom on purpose. What if every word that you spoke showed up on your skin? Would you still be beautiful? Many of us don't realize it, but there's a silent story that's running in the background of our lives. It's shaping how we see ourselves, how we show up in the world, everything from our choices, our relationships, and even our sense of worth. So today on the Freedom Camp podcast, we are going to explore that hidden narrator, the one that whispers in the background and influences everything from our choices and our relationships down even to our sense of worth. We're going to talk about how these stories get written, often long before we realize it. We're going to begin editing the script so that the internal dialogue that we have matches up with what God says that we are. Because the story that we tell ourselves becomes the life that we live. And when your story is rooted in truth and love, it changes everything. It changes your confidence, your peace, your dreams, and even your freedom. So we're going to start with a story, and then we'll look at where those background stories came from, how to identify them, and then how to rewrite them into the life-giving words that fuel your next season of growth and freedom. So oftentimes, this background noise or background thinking is referred to as our B-roll, which comes from video work. And in the world of video, we've got our main character, and then we've got what's going on in the background, setting the scene, establishing dynamics, all kinds of things like that. So one of the easiest ways for me to visualize this is to see myself calm, peaceful, smile on my face, not a care in the world. And behind me is, let's say, the ocean. And the waves are rolling and the seagulls are flying and doing their beautiful sounds, and the sun is shining and life is sweet. Now, the ocean is the background. That's the B-roll. Imagine then that instead of the ocean and the waves and the sunshine, I'm in the emergency room. And there's blood, and people are horrified and scared, and they're in pain, and there's people rushing around, and it's very chaotic, and there's nothing really pleasant or enjoyable about it. But I still look the same. I'm still calm and peaceful with a smile on my face. That is the difference in B-roll, meaning our B-roll is the ocean and the sunshine, or our B-roll is the bottom's about to fall out, the rug's going to get pulled out from under us, we're walking on eggshells, and something scary or bad is about to happen at any minute. Now, that's just an example of your B-roll. Maybe your B-roll is expectations of yourself. Maybe your B-roll is how you wish things could be, and you don't see them in that way, which is what was happening with me. So the little story, this was years ago now, and still totally relevant to today. I was out hiking. I remember exactly where I was. I was praying, complaining. I was grumbling about something. I don't remember any of the details, luckily. But what I do remember is when I was done complaining, I muttered under my breath, like, oh, story of my life, something to that effect. And I got checked. And it was like suddenly, like, boom. Um, this realization that if I keep thinking that that is the story of my life, it will be the story of my life. And I am perpetuating that being the story of my life by continuing to make that comment, continuing to think that way, because that comment, where that comment comes from, is a history of things not working out and repeated patterns of just all kinds of challenges and struggles and things not working out for me, compared with looking out around at other people and seemingly other people things were working out. And so that moment continues to impact me. I have continued to catch myself in the last, I don't know, 20 some years, 10 some years, at times doing the same thing. Not so much with saying that's the story of my life, but like an onion, once you peel back one layer, there's often another layer of growth. So now I'm on to other to other things, but the principle is still the same. There is this background going on that impacts the way that I see myself in the world, the way that I see myself as myself, even the way that I see myself in any role that I may be participating in, as a wife, a mom, a coach, a daughter, a friend, etc. So I want to invite you to reflect for a moment and think about, what are the words that run through your mind the most? What's going on in your B-roll? What image, what visual comes up for you? And or what word or words come up for you? So now that you've got a visual and or some words, we want to think about where those words come from. So maybe it's family, maybe it's a cultural thing, maybe it's trauma, something that happened to you. It could be something that happened 3 generations ago. Maybe your grandma ended up having a horrible experience with the police, for example, or some authority, and then from that experience had an aversion to authority, and then taught her daughter, your mom, to have that same aversion or suspicion, or their belief they're always out to get you, or whatever it is. And then your mom inadvertently taught you that. And then you're realizing, like, I don't even know why I think this. That's potentially an example, really, of all of them. But the trauma doesn't have to be your own. There's also expectations that can come into play. And there's also even things with church, meaning like church language and what is appropriate or inappropriate, depending upon what denomination that you are in. So even within denominations, there can be a lot of things that can be challenging. If you grew up in a denomination where you were never able to wear makeup, for example, and then you're now in a denomination that does wear makeup, there could be some story work for you to do within that. So then it's making the connection, like, okay, where does this come from? And ultimately, it doesn't matter where it comes from. If it doesn't come from God, then well, if it doesn't come from God and it doesn't agree with God, then you likely want to sweep it out anyway. But it can be helpful in the process of trying to identify the things, to see where it is that they came from, and to be able to recognize them. So now you're looking at your identity beyond your roles. which I mentioned briefly a couple minutes ago. There is the who you are versus the what you do. And so by that, oftentimes we can get mired, especially, maybe you've been married for 20 years or a mom for 20 years. You can, or an employee or a business owner, anything, whatever it is, you can tend to see yourself as what you do, not who you are. So those roles can even distort your worth. It can distort receiving your identity from who God says that you are. And instead, it ends up being like the expectations of your family on you as a wife and mom. And if you don't meet those expectations, then perhaps you can feel like you are not worthy or you're not doing a good enough job, when in reality, maybe there is some reworking that needs to be done in the way that you are thinking about it, and potentially even in the way that your family is thinking about it. But for the purpose of this, we're focused internally. Assume nothing else changes around you. What would it be if someone was to ask you, who does God say you are? And you're like, I'm a wife, I'm a mom, I'm a daughter, I'm a friend. Okay, but that's not who you are. So this is cutting into like, I am generous, I am creative, I am kind, um, things like that, things that you carry into any role that you are doing. And now we want to look at practical ways to replace the old stories with God's truth. So, for example, back to my story, like, oh, that's the story of my life. Well, does God encourage us in the word to just go along with all of the things that are not of Him and just mutter and complain and moan about it? Or does He encourage us to stand on His truth, His promises, get in the word, know who He says we are, walk in who He says we are? Rhetorical question. But how often does our background not match what God says? And one way that I like to think about this is, if I take my identity in that God has given me, if I take that identity and I call it money in the bank, it's sitting in the bank, it's in a bank vault or whatever those things are called. I have the key. I can go and get that out, and then I can take it with me and I can keep it. Or I can just leave it there and never go and get it. But that doesn't mean it's not there. It is there for me, but I'm back here, oh, I wish I had $5 for a loaf of bread, when I have $1 million in the bank, in terms of God's provision, for example. And I don't just mean it monetarily. I'm just using that as an example, a visual of like connecting with God's identity and how we can see ourselves the way that God sees us. So, thinking about some of the things that God says about us: we are the beloved, we are fearfully and wonderfully made, we are a new creation. When we don't see ourselves the way that God sees us, we are in essence not cooperating with God and not growing in the freedom that He has for us. So, what we want to do is we want to make small shifts or huge shifts. I'm not going to hold you back, but I don't want to overwhelm. So, how can you align your identity with who God says you are and your daily life? Maybe that means getting a post it note and writing what God says about you and putting it somewhere that you're going to see it. Maybe that's meditating on His word. Maybe that's reminding yourself when you're doing something for your family that you don't enjoy, or your employer, or anyone. Like you're scrubbing toilets and you're like, I don't feel like I'm the beloved right now. And yet, just because you don't feel like it doesn't mean you aren't. And guess what? If you start telling yourself, I am the beloved, then before long, you're going to be scrubbing toilets and you're going to feel like you're the beloved too. Because our actions, our thinking impacts our emotions, which then impact our actions, which then impact our results. So all of this ends up playing out into, like I was saying at the beginning, our relationships, our dreams, and even our purpose. So I want you to remember that the words that we speak over ourselves really matter. They shape the atmosphere of your life, often even more than the external circumstances of your life do. That when we shift our inner story, our B-roll, to match God's truth, then we stop living as characters that are written by someone else. We stop being victims of the world around us, and we really step into the life that we were created for. So I would love to hear from you. I'm curious what one word or phrase is that you want to speak over yourself this week. Share it in the comments so that we can encourage each other and keep rewriting the background of our stories together. Also, if this conversation resonated with you, please take a minute to like it, subscribe, and share this episode with a friend who might need the same reminder today. Thanks for listening to the Freedom Camp podcast, where we believe freedom is nurtured from within and grows when you tend to it. If this stirred something in you, let it take root this week and see what grows. And if you enjoyed this or found it meaningful, please give the gift of a review, share it with a friend, and leave a comment below. It helps us build this podcast community because we weren't meant to grow alone.